Good evening to everybody. About the questions, I do want to answer questions if possible. We'll have an intermission about 10 minutes, midway, and I'm not so sure about the end of the lecture because it's very compacted. But if you want to write it down in the chat box, I will definitely answer all the questions. So, last week we finished our review to World War I, if you remember. And the timeline for today will be to review the rise of the Nazi Party immediately after World War I and the Weimar Republic. You remember Germany was a republic called Weimar Republic because the constitution was written in the city of Weimar. And that lasted only 4 years because Nazi rise to power in 1933 and Nazification was made rampant and Hitler became the Chancellor and Reichsführer and the Nazi Party assumed full power. With this, it established the fascism in Germany. Do recall that Hitler was appointed by von Hindenburg, the president, as a chancellor because Germany was in big crisis. But when 1 year later, when Hindenburg died, he took the title of Reichsführer by himself without any appointment. So let's review the German people after Versailles. And that's important because all what happens in the Versailles, the Treaty of Versailles, caused the power of the Nazi, World War II, Holocaust, everything. Well, remember that Germany was humiliated by the treaty. And particularly in the German concept of life, they were very upset that they were asked to assume blame for the war. And they said it was not their blame. They lost territories, many territories. They lost 12% of their population, lost 16% of coal reserves, which were essential for the energy at that time, loss of heavy industries, exactly if you want to know, 48% of heavy iron industry, which was in the Lorraine, that was given back to France, loss of productive homeland, loss of income, reparations and debt payments that were absolutely huge. And I think that was possibly a mistake of Clemenceau, who was absolutely focused on destroying Germany. And that was impossible. There was inflation, there was unemployment, there were suicides, many suicides. To see the inflation, in January 19, the German marks needed to buy 1 ounce of gold, 170 marks in January 19. This is after the treaty was signed in August 18. In November 24, it took this figure. I don't know if you can see it. It was 87 billion marks for 1 ounce of gold. Another example, this is unemployment in Germany between 1928 and 35. This is the productivity, the gross national product, inflation adjusted, was horrible, unprecedented. And then the German people, in a way, welcomed the Nazi Party. The educated people thought that it was only temporary. Antisemitism was okay for them. Gradually, most Germans appreciated coming out from the Weimar Republic economic difficulties, and they voted for the NSDAP, the National Sozialistische Demokratische Arbeiterpartei, Arbeiter, workers. It was pretty much desired. Although This party came with something new that they did not convey to the people. Something new was called fascism. And I don't know how everybody uses the word fascist and fascist, but I think that very few people know exactly what it meant. Fascism was a form of far-right authoritarian, ultra-nationalistic system characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition, strong regimentation of society, and the rest that you see. It was started by Mussolini. Mussolini was an actor and he wanted to impress people and said that he wanted to have the fasces that the Roman legionnaire used, all just to impress people. Doesn't mean the word could have been avoided, but it was not. For the German fascism, the important thing was nationalism. They had the slogan, Ein Volk, ein Reich, ein Führer. One people, one empire, one leader. One leader. They never had this before. And they advocated imperialism, autocracy, anti-communism, anti-Semitism, a new social order, heroism, women in the Nazi Germany that we might review, and Hitlerjugend, the youth. They were immensely racist. And the racial ideology of the Nazi party, the people did not know until later on. They advocated that they are an alien race. The Germans are the master race. They advocated that it's inequality of the human races. For that they used eugenics as a way to purify the race. And they had the racial policy of Nazi Germany, what is called Völkisch, the people equality, which was never in fact adopted. And also another important thing that has repercussions later, Heim ins Reich, home to the Reich, home of the German people who were lost after the Treaty of Versailles, for them to come back into Deutschland, into Germany. Space, living space, Lebensraum, that was an excuse to expand and blood and soil. Matters of dictatorships. Now, let's review that carefully. There were the terrible things of propaganda, using the discredit the press, calling them fake news, voter suppression, secret services. And that had to be implemented by the paramilitaries, very powerful, that had control of the police force, abuse of social media, physical abuse, eroding the democracy gradually and effectively, and eventually committing genocide. The propaganda is something that we should really remember. It was an undemocratic technique used by all totalitarian regimes, all of them. Soviet did the same. It invades facts, uses lies, and censorship. It is, to me, an Orwellian scenario, because things that are real become unreal, and vice versa. Joseph Goebbels in 1934 said, "Political propaganda speaks the language of the people because it wants to be understood by the man on the street." Absolutely lie. And I thought to bring you to your attention the propaganda in George Orwell. And look at that. Joseph Goebbels, Adolf Hitler's propaganda minister, said, "We have made the Reich by propaganda." That is true. They did it. Some ideas of Goebbels that are important to us to remember. When one lies, one should lie big and stick to it, even at the risk of looking ridiculous. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. And I noticed in all the dictatorships that I lived through, they use propaganda exactly on this principle. And to my Shock. Last month, on May 3rd, Sergei Lavrov, Russian Foreign Affairs Minister, in an interview with Italian news, explains why they want to invade Ukraine to denazify the country. And he said, quote, "How can Nazification exist if we are Jewish? In my opinion, Hitler also had Jewish origin. And for some time, we have heard from the Jewish people that the biggest anti-Semites were Jewish." To which Yair Lapid from Israel said that this is absolutely unforgivable. Well, it so happened. The paramilitaries were very powerful in Nazi Germany. 8 powerful organizations, sometimes working one against the other, but the most powerful among them was SS and the Einsatzgruppen and the Gestapo for the internal policies. Other countries took example. The Soviet Russia had the NKVD, and in fact before NKVD they have similar organizations. It was not an invention of the German. Hungary had Arrow Cross, Romania Iron Guard, Croatia the Ustaše, Slovakia Ludac, all of them immensely anti-Semitic and ready to commit genocide. Now, some people I heard saying that Hitler was not anti-Semitic. Well, I know the famous letter in 1919 when he said exactly that anti-Semitism based on reason must lead to the systemic legal combating and removal of the rights of the Jews. And his final aim must be the uncompromising removal of the Jews altogether. He had a friend in childhood, the only friend, and this Gusti Kubitschek, of Czech origin, wrote his memoirs, and he said that he could not understand the cause of Hitler's anti-Semitism. It remained a mystery for everybody. Now, the factors that contributed to Hitler's rise are complicated, but based on what the situation was in Germany after the Versailles and after the Weimar Republic, you can understand based on cause and effect. There was economic depression. The Treaty of Versailles stripped Germany of everything that I showed you, asked them to pay war reparations that were immense. There was a party of Social Democrats and the party of Communists. The Social Democrats made many good changes, but they were always criticized by the Communists who wanted to assume power. And there were conditions for popularity of the Nazis that received the vote of the people in the elections. And I thought about this and I thought to share with you. I think Germany should have known. When I say Germany, I mean the German people. They were quite educated, but they missed on what Plato said. Demagogues use free speech to install themselves as tyrants. And his student, Aristotle, something very important to us even today. Inequality in the society brings instability. And so he started against the Jews. In 1933, immediately after he was appointed in February 33 as Chancellor, and May 33 in Berlin, books written by Jewish and non-Jewish democratic authors were burned. You know very well that burning books does not destroy an idea. Then boycott of Jewish stores in April 33. And then the Nuremberg laws in September 35. Law for the protection of German blood and German honor, and the Reich citizenship law. There are more than I can show you, but definitely Jews were losing their citizenship. And then as a effect of this, Franklin Delano Roosevelt called a meeting in Evian-les-Bains in France, a conference called to discuss the plight of Jewish refugees from persecution by Nazis. 32 countries and 24 voluntary organizations, the International Red Cross, etc., participated. Jews have not been invited. Palestine Jews were quite a large community. At that time, there were about 600, 700,000 Jews. They were ignored. And the result of the Evian conference was the Dominican Republic accepted 100,000 refugees, very impressive. Costa Rica accepted refugees. United States only the INS quota of 30,000 a year. United Kingdom the same. Canada none. Australia none. France had reached what they said the extreme point of saturation. And that was called by everybody, including the Nazi, the doomed conference. It was a useful propaganda tool for the Nazi, showing, don't you see, nobody wants the Jews. And the Evian conference made a place in history as a test of the civilization, where civilization failed and the disaster started. It started with Kristallnacht, 5 months later, in 1938. Night of Broken Glass or November pogroms. Why? Gauleiters, which were the name of the governor of various provinces of the Nazi Party, the National Socialist Democratic Party, wanted to seize Jewish property. Simple like that. And something that people don't know. Their pretext was that their young Jewish Polish Herschel Greenspan, 17-year-old, killed Ernst von Rath, German diplomat in Paris, but they don't say that they had a homosexual relationship and Herschel wanted out of that relationship. That made the other one be very jealous and one killed the other. The Sturmabteilung, the SA, which was very powerful at that time, the Sicherheitspolizei, and civilians throughout Germany were very active in the Kristallnacht. Jewish stores, homes, hospitals, schools were ransacked. Synagogues and thousands of Jewish businesses were destroyed. 30,000 Jewish men were arrested and sent to concentration camps of that time, Dachau and Sachsenhausen, the oldest one. Several hundred dead, more than 600 suicides. And Goebbels said that for him, what people did was a popular wrath. And Heinrich, the chief of the SA, of the SIPO, arrest healthy men for work in concentration camps. And so it was done. Jewish community was fined by the German state 1 billion Reichsmark. All insurance payments were paid to the state. Jews got nothing. More than 115,000 Jews could emigrate and emigrated mostly to Palestine. Well, people don't know that former Kaiser Wilhelm II, who was in refuge in Holland, said, "For the first time, I am ashamed to be a German." Protestant and Catholic disapproved of racial persecution. They met in Barmen, a city called Barmen, and had the Declaration of 1934 with 6 points. The most important was that they were opposed to German Christians who gave in to Hitler. They were absolutely for separation of church and state. They were opposed to any protection of the churches of the Nazi actions, and the Kristallnacht was considered and is considered the beginning of the Holocaust. Shortly thereafter, the German Jewish passports were given in this form with a big J, and on all of them, without exception, regardless of the name, Jews, men, were called Israel and women were called Sarah. So Jews in the Nazi Germany at the rise of the Nazi were a sad scene. Between 1933, when Hitler assumed power, to 1939, when war started, approximately 300,000 Jews emigrated to Palestine, which, as I mentioned before, about 60%, fortunately. And why did not 200,000 or 250,000 remain in Germany, and they could never understand why? The Nuremberg laws made them Jews lose their citizenship. They were banned from all professional jobs. I told you about the letters on the passports. Jewish children are eliminated from schools, beaten many times, and Kristallnacht that I just described. Then started deportation. 1941 started the deportation to ghetto and concentration camps. This was the manifestation of German antisemitism. In September 41, at Goebbels' order, the Star of David has been instituted for all Jews in any place, regardless of their functions. And then in January 42, the call of Goering for a total solution of the Jewish question, quote unquote, a Wannsee conference was called. The Wannsee conference was a meeting of all the senior government officials and the Schutzstaffel, or the SS leaders. In the Berlin suburb of Wannsee in January 1942, Reinhard Heinrich, the director of at that time he became already the director of the SS, and at the request of Hermann Goering, he called this conference. It was supposed to create a cooperation for the implementation of the so-called final solution of the Jewish question. In fact, that was, in simple English, the destruction of the Jews. And they had the inventory of the number of Jews in Europe that was given to Eichmann with the responsibility to take care of this. And they came to the figure, I don't know if it is covered for you. No, I cannot move it. They came to a figure of 11 million. And in Soviet Russia, 5 million, 3 million in general government, which was the part of Poland that Germany invaded, and it came out to 11 million. Probably there was more than that, but they did not calculate well. And the final solution, put simple, was that most of the gas chambers used carbon monoxide from diesel engines. In Auschwitz and Majdanek, they used the Cyclone B they got from a chemist, pellets which were highly poisonous insecticide supplied in the form of gas, and after gassing, prisoners were removed the hair, gold teeth, fillings, and of course their clothing, and they were supposed to be killed and burned. And they installed all the installation for terminating the Jews. The Nazi annihilation of the Jews was first placement of Jews in the ghettos, moving from the Jews from the ghettos into concentration camps, and then sending the prisoners to the extermination camps and renewing that until they totally destroy the Jewish nation. And after that, by the order of Hitler, I will show you that, removing all the evidence for what they committed. It started with Jews being, as soon as they entered Poland in 1938-39, they moved the Jews. You see they have the Star of David. They have to move into the ghetto. And let's talk about the ghettos. Ghetto comes from the Italian name Borghetto, a little town. These are closed areas in cities of Europe where Jews were enclosed. The definition is the part of a city in which Jews lived as a result of social, legal, economic, and cultural pressures for their isolation. In fact, you'll be surprised, the first ghetto was made in Venice, Italy in 1516, but not to kill the Jews, just to isolate them. In 1941, there were more than 1,000 ghettos in Europe, populated by Jews who were not allowed to live outside the ghettos. Their dismal food and hygiene, diseases, famine, and there were deaths every day. There was the first method of isolating the Jews, taking their properties and having full control of the Jews, because their apartment, their houses, their furniture, their items, paintings, work of art or whatever, was immediately assumed by Germans. Look at the map to see the size of the operation as ordered by the Wannsee Conference. This is the map of Europe in 1942, that the Nazi army was the most advanced. France was conquered. This is the Vichy, France. This is Germany, and the part of Poland here is called general government. There were all these light gray, light blue were conquered by the army, and they were at the border of Moscow. Norway was occupied. Sweden was so-called neutral. Switzerland was neutral. Spain and Portugal were neutral. Turkey was neutral. Here, all the Balkan countries were occupied, or they were allies. Romania, Hungary, Slovakia, Bulgaria, Greece was occupied, part of Yugoslavia, except Serbia was still independent. And there were concentration camps all over the place, from France to Holland, Dachau near Munich, Buchenwald, Bergen-Belsen, Sachsenhausen, Ravensbrück, and then in Poland, or what was Poland, you see in red, these are the destruction camps. Auschwitz-Birkenau near Krakow, Helmo, Treblinka near Warsaw, Sobibor and Majdanek near Lublin and Belzec. Okay, anti-Semitism in occupied Poland during World War II, where there was a great activity for the Nazi here. You see the main cities with ghetto. You see the major concentration camps, the black points, many concentration camps, and you see the sign of the extermination camps, about 6 in Poland. There were 8 total. And here is an episode that we have to review, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. So the Jews, I said, they were forced into the ghettos in the Polish cities. The Warsaw Ghetto in 1939, there were close to 400,000 Jews. Many died of diseases every day. Suddenly they heard about the SS Großaktion Warschau for allegedly resettlement. More than 250,000 Jews were deported from the ghetto of Warsaw to Treblinka and Majdanek camps and murdered. The youth organizations organized themselves. There were 2 of them, Jewish Combat Organization, Jewish Military Union, with great price, with a saga that I cannot describe today, but we'll talk about when we talk about the Holocaust. They got armament from Poles in the resistance. That was a difficult story, and they started to train themselves for fighting the Germans. And so they did. The Germans were very shocked about this act of bravery. They never thought that the Jews would be qualified or be capable of doing this. So they put fire on the ghetto. And so 13,000 Jews that were hiding in the ghetto were burned alive. And the Holocaust, United States Holocaust Memorial said, one of the most significant occurrences in the history of the Jewish people under the Nazi was the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. You understand, this is the way they found out that the deportation to Treblinka and found out that nobody ever came back. And then this is the fire on the ghetto in April 1943. This was just German parading. And this picture that has been all around the world with this little boy. These are people, about 200 of them, that were saved from the cellars of the Warsaw Ghetto. And it's all what remained alive from 400,000. About Auschwitz I will talk more in detail when I will talk about the Holocaust. But the summary of Auschwitz, in honor of all these dead people, I must tell you, it was the largest Nazi concentration and death camp. Nazi deported more than 1 million people to Auschwitz. 1,100,000 Jews, 150,000 Poles, 23,000 Roma, 15,000 Soviet prisoners of war, 25,000 prisoners from other ethnic groups. 1,100,000 of these people died in Auschwitz, and 90% of them were Jews. The SS murdered them. And came after the war, it came to our attention that was hiding the terrible truth that Himmler sent a letter to camp's commanders in which he said, quote, "The Führer holds you personally responsible for making sure that not a single prisoner from the concentration camps falls alive into the hands of the enemy." Well, as you know, several hundred were alive. They made even the death marches when Soviets and the Americans on the other side were coming close. So they removed the Jews from the camps, and on the death marches were others who died. They plundered the goods from the barracks. Building supplies were transported to the German interior. To give you just an impression of what happened in these 5 weeks between December 44 and January 5, 1945, over 1 million items of clothing were shipped to Germany from Auschwitz. There were other things that I'll detail when I will talk about the Holocaust, how much gold they had, etc. I'd like to review the Antisemitism in Lithuania. There were two organizations made by the local officials, Zabschutz and Einsatzgruppen, that were killers. Their job was to kill. And those with white armbands were Lithuanian collaborators who knew to find out the Jews and to bring them under any other pretext. This photograph I put because it is so heart-rending. On sight of Jews killed, a rabbi tries to say Kaddish. And the soldiers, the German soldiers, found this was very amusing. Others were from Lithuania, from a community of 263,000 in 1939, only 2,000 left in 2014. Most of them emigrated from the survivors. Most of them emigrated to Israel. Antisemitism in occupied Ukraine. Again, there were the camps. This is Romania. Here was Bessarabia. And this is an area that Hitler gave to Romanians to administer and to plunder. And you see the signs of extermination camps. You will see that. When the Nazi invaded the Ukraine, Ukrainian peasants had two aims. First of all, they wanted to be on the side of the Germans because they hated Stalin and the Soviets. They thought the Nazi will help them. Secondly, they wanted to get hold of the Jewish property. So they volunteered to help in getting the Jews from their homes, the shtetls, the little communities that the Germans did not know where they were. So they assumed the stuff led by the Jews and brought them to a place called Babi Yar. These photographs were taken by German soldiers and they were sold after that at a high price. This is a 42 photograph showing how they were killing people on the border of a trough, of the mass grave. That gave them the idea of the Babi Yar massacre in September 1941. With the Ukrainian police, militia, so-called, they brought Jews for so-called relocation in the Babi Yar ravine near Kiev in Ukraine. 33,771 Jews were brought to the border of the ravine that day. They were ordered to undress. All women had breasts cut and salt was sprinkled on their wounds. Men had their genitals cut. Young women were raped by Ukrainian militia in front of their parents. The Jews were shot on the ravine borders and fell into the ravine. Only 27 young Jews escaped in the woods to tell what happened. It is the largest single Holocaust murder. You see how they were coming, this photo taken by Nazi officers. They were totally innocent, they thought it would be relocated. These were killed and falling into the ravine. This is the result of the massacre. And that was the ravine near Kiev in 1990 when I took this picture when I was invited to Kiev to lecture. We should never forget. The world must remember the killing of 6 million Jews, 20 million Russians, 10 million Christians, innocent people beaten, tortured, murdered. And now a little bit in the country I was born. There were many anti-Semitic laws. They were always anti-Semitic. But they had a very large Jewish community, about close to 800,000. Most of them were citizens. They were not allowed to own land. They were active in commerce, many very rich, and many in intellectual profession with the finest reputations. They lost big areas which were the largest part of the Jewish population in 1940. Bessarabia to Soviet Russia, doesn't matter the names. King Carol II was forced to abdicate, and the pro-Nazi government came to power. Now, what is recalled is the Iron Guard legionaries, when the legionary arrested Jews of any age who raped and murdered them in Bucharest. The corpses were hanged in the slaughterhouses with signs of kosher meat. In the Yesi death trains, Romanian soldiers, police, and German SS rounded 5,000 Jews in police headquarters. Romanian mantra, Judio Bolshevis. Several thousand were killed, several thousand were put in trains, died in misery, without water, without food, and Romanian soldiers removed them from the trains. Now I mentioned Transnistria. This is this area. You see Odessa here. This is right now where battles are here on the border. This is Bessarabia. And Romania sent the Jews from this area that was given to Soviets, ceded In this part, Bukovina, about 400,000 of them were passing through a place here where we were living at that time. And my father asked me and my brother to give them bread, medication, and whatever is needed in their went to the way to Transnistria, where there were 150 ghettos and camps functioning. During this period, 1941 to 1944, Transnistria was used as a killing field for the extermination of Jews. I wrote about this in my book. It's a very sad chapter. So I ask you, did the world learn anything? History teaches only what to avoid. Let's rest a little bit. 10 minutes. I will open the chat books. Oh, this is a note from Dana to use the chat books. The chat box I will open. All right. Any questions? Dana?
Yes.
Dana?
Yes.
Any questions?
I don't see any questions. Does anyone have any questions that you would like to ask? You can either use the chat box or you can unmute yourself.
I'll tell you, for me personally, I'm just sitting here. Not that this is new to me. This is not new at all. But the way this is being told, I'm just sort of sitting here in stunned silence, even though this is a story. We've been to Yad Vashem, we've been to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, we've been to the Holocaust Museum in New York, but you're telling a story in such a comprehensive, cohesive way that I don't know what question I would ask, that hasn't been covered.
That was Randy.
Randy, it's sad, but that's our story.
Well, the saddest thing is that this lesson has not been learned.
Not been learned.
The parallels of the post-war situation in Germany, we're sort of edging our way towards that. Nobody has taken expropriated American resources, but the economic situation, inflation, recession, all of those things come, and the bloodthirsty mob is rearing its head. The Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and the 3%ers are the brown shirts of today. It's like nothing's been learned.
Well, that's exactly how I ended the first part. And with your permission, I will continue now with the second part. You are right, and thank you for your comments.
I just want to make sure, does anyone have a question before we move on to the second part?
I think it's amazing. And I think this is a great lecture that should be repeated frequently.
Thank you. I'll make that note.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that Dana will announce lectures on the Holocaust, and I don't want to do this for her. She will send an email, etc. I said, let's continue then. I said, did we learn anything? Did we, the world, learn anything? I learned in school that history teaches only what to avoid. Violence and acts of unspeakable cruelty are still perpetrated around the world against people for their religion, their race, or their beliefs. So I'll turn now to the events after World War II. As I said before, I did not develop the Holocaust in this lecture, because I prefer to talk about anti-Semitism, and the Holocaust is a separate issue evolving from the ferocious anti-Semitism of the time? Well, some good things happen. And I am very touched and thankful to the great popes we had. First of all, Pope John the 23rd. He was a great advocate for the human rights, and he was the first one to make the confession for the Church on the sin of anti-Semitism. He was the initiator of the Second Vatican Council. And I remember how closely we followed it in 1965, because it addressed the charge of Jewish deicide, horrible, repudiating the belief in the collective Jewish guilt for the crucifixion of the Jesus. The Council issued a declaration, Nostra Aetate, in our time, which read in part, and you can read it with me, through the Jewish authorities and those who followed their lead pressed for the death of Christ. Still, what happened in his passion cannot be charged against all the Jews without distinction, then alive, nor against the Jews of today. The Jews should not be presented as rejected or accursed by God, as if this followed from the Holy Scriptures. He agreed the Holy Scriptures, the Gospels, incited much of the anti-Semitism in their lack of better knowledge. And then St. Paul VI, I remember when he visited Israel, I was there, and he was also visiting the synagogue in Rome in 1986. Yes, once again, through myself, the Church, in the words of the well-known Declaration Nostra Aetate, deplores the hatred, persecutions, and displays of anti-Semitism directed against the Jews at any time and by anyone. I repeat, by anyone. And then St. John Paul II visited Israel, the first pope to do that. And remember his letter that he put on the Western Wall. And he wrote, I assure the Jewish people the Catholic Church is deeply saddened by the hatred, acts of persecution, and displays of anti-Semitism against the Jews by Christians at any time and in any place. And then, no words strong enough can deplore the terrible tragedy of the Holocaust. We are deeply saddened by the behavior of those, etc., etc. We wish to commit ourselves to genuine brotherhood with the people of the covenant. So, perhaps we live new times. Perhaps.
Well,
Interesting.
can I stop you for a question? It would get lost if we went to the chat. The first one, the one that began true, your forebearers. Remember? No, further back. Nope. This one. Nope. Come back down one. This one, yes. I thought we said last week or 2 weeks ago that it was not possible for the Jews to have killed Christ. That
True.
It was, sorry?
I said true.
Right. So I saw the later statements, the one that came after this, made no statement about the veracity of the Second Vatican Council. They just didn't touch it. But has anybody now repudiated that first sentence?
I don't know. But anything can be said, and there will be other people who will not believe what was said. Anything can be written, and other people will say that is not the truth. So we live in a crazy world.
No, I understand that. But if I read this sentence, this, what you have up here, I might say, well, you, the Pope, may absolve the Jews for what their ancestors did, but I don't, when in fact, you know, it wasn't even their ancestors. This is a bit of a backhanded apology, you know?
I know. There were comments like this plentifully in 1965, and I will invite you to go on the literature of the Second Vatican Council. It is very important for all of us to know what was written and what was done. I followed the debates at that time. I just arrived in United States, or rather I was in Montreal, and I was following this, and I thought, by nature, I am inclined to believe in the good faith. And that is what the Second Vatican gave us. It is not perfect, but I still believe it is a step in the right direction.
Thank you.
I like to go on the Lutheran Church, who remember what I showed you from Martin Luther King. There was a lot of added anti-Semitism in his books. But they said exactly this. It is imperative for the Lutheran Church, which knows itself to be indebted to the work and tradition of Martin Luther, to take seriously also his anti-Jewish utterances, to acknowledge their theological function and to reflect on their consequences. It has to distance itself from every expression of anti-Semitism in Lutheran theology. I'm not saying that there are not Lutherans who consider all this totally wrong, and they will continue to believe in what they prefer to believe. Look at that. A search was done in 2019. I don't know anything after that, but the Anti-Defamation League of the United States reported on anti-Semitism in Europe. Anti-Semitism in Europe. Greece, 67%, fomented by the church, very much so. The Greek Orthodox Church is immensely anti-Semitic. Poland, 48%. Ukraine, 46%. These were the two countries where most of the European Jews live. Hungary, 42%. Serbia, 42%. And Czech Republic, another education, another culture, 13%. And what they say, what they collected, Jews are more loyal to Israel, Jews have too much power in the business world, Jews have too much control over the media, Jews talk too much about what happened to them in the Holocaust. You see, we should not talk about that. The Holocaust revisionism is called today, is very strong in Poland and in Hungary. You know that in Poland there is a Holocaust law. It's a criminal offense to attribute Nazi crimes to Poland or to use the term Polish death camps. The Poles, and I said this was from me, the Poles and the Hungarians need to fight anti-Semitism, not passing laws denying their part in the Holocaust. In Romania,
I think it would probably be good to point out that those are the two most authoritarian states in Europe. And if we go back to what you said about the mob rule for political purposes,
yeah,
you know,
this is true rather for Hungary rather than Poland. But you are right, you have a very good point. It goes very well with the mobs. Anti-Semitism goes very well with the mobs. It's a preferred topic. I'll show you this. Let me just finish that. Anti-Semitism is alive and well in Romania. I put it this because there are perhaps 3,000 Jews left in Romania. They use a widespread denial of the existence of anti-Semitism and their denial of any Romanian involvement or responsibility in the Holocaust. That's a very good example of what I told you before. You can write whatever you want. allegedly, they did not have any involvement. They killed 400,000 Jews in Transnistria and the others in Romania, and they made their corpses hang as kosher meat, but they did not kill any Jews. I said, is there anti-Semitism in the Russian Federation? Because I was told that there is no anti-Semitism. It started already with Stalin, the night of the murdered poets. You will know about the prominent Yiddish writers, poets, and actors executed for no reason. And then the Stalin anti-Semitic campaign against the doctor's plot, which they killed the best authorities in medicine in 1953. Then Russian involvement, oh, you know that. They did not allow the Jews after the Six-Day War and the victory of Israel that caused many Jews in Russia to ask to go to Israel. And they were called the refuseniks because they were not given the permission. And they called them, let my people go, quoting Moses, what Moses told the Pharaoh. Leonid Brezhnev denounced anti-Semitism, but did not let them go. Finally, it was the good thing that Gorbachev came to power and allowed free emigration of the Jews, and most of the Russian Jews who wanted to leave left at the time. In the Russian Federation, anti-Semitism is low but persistent. So much so that in 2001, I laugh at this because it's ridiculous. The United States senators wrote to President Putin about their concern about popular anti-Semitism in Russia. His reply, there is no anti-Semitism in Russia. Members of Duma accused Jews of anti-Christian feelings and ritual murder. They accused the Jews for ritual murder. The Russian Orthodox Patriarch Alexei II in 2005 described anti-Semitism as a radical expression of misanthropy and racism. And finally, in 2006, and repeatedly since then, Zhids, that's not a nice word for it. The word is Evrei, but they call it Zhids as kaik. Stop drinking Russian blood. But there is no anti-Semitism in Russia. And Putin, with his friend, Chief Rabbi Beryl Lazer, light candles on Hanukkah. I think I will skip this is a little bit of anti-Semitism in the United Kingdom. And we never excuse Britain for not allowing the poor German Jews to emigrate to Palestine where they had a mandate. That was a horrible thing. On the other hand, they saved 10,000 Jewish children during the war, and that is monument Kindertransport is dubbed British Schindler. Very beautiful. The Brits are capable of very nice facts. They are also terrible in other areas. There is anti-Semitism rising. As you see, anti-Semitic attitudes, 2017 survey. Let's talk about the United States. Well, these were the 13 British colonies in North America. And the reason I put this, because I want to show you the Jewish congregation in each one of the states with their ears. And you have it in the PDF file that I send you, and you'll see it also in the recording, so I will not spend time on that. I will only tell you that the first Jew in America came in 1584, and his name was Joachim Gans. I don't know what he was doing. We know about 1621. In 1621, Elias Lagardo came from Languedoc, France, to teach colonists how to make wine. And then in 1654, 23 Sephardic Jews from Recife, Brazil, a Dutch colony at that time, arrived in New Amsterdam. These were the first large colony of Jews in New York, New Amsterdam at that time. Then in 1740, Parliament passed the Plantation Act encouraging immigration. But in 1762, the governor of Rhode Island refused to grant citizenship because he said no person who is not a Christian of Christian religion can be admitted to this country. Washington did not agree with him. In the War of Independence time, Haim Solomon, an immigrant from Poland, financier of the Continental Army, made possible for two Jews to come to America. And this was a drawing of famous Haim Solomon. He came to the United States when he was about 35 years old, born in Poland. How he made money in the United States, I don't know. But he became the financier of the army, the Continental Army. He converted some French loans into ready cash by selling bills of exchange to Robert Morris, the superintendent of finance of the 13 colonies. And so George Washington appreciated very much the contribution of Haim Solomon. A plaque is made for him at his statue in Pan Pacific Park in Los Angeles. Go and visit. There was anti-Semitism in late 19th. Consider they have the money and they have the power. Perhaps there are still people believing in that. But after World War II, we turn a page. Remember, 500 American Jews fought in World War II, and many died for their country. And after World War II, we had an increase in synagogue affiliation. I think it's a recrudescence of the Jewishness in the Jews. The political affiliation, markedly democratic. There were conservative, and there are conservative Jews, Republican. They were in favor of Eisenhower, 40%. And in 1948, a phenomenal thing happened. The State of Israel was created, a symbol around which the American Jews are absolutely united. We thought that in 21st century, I think it's correct to say there is an end of the religious anti-Semitism in the United States. Catholic Church and Lutheran Church recognize past events, welcome a new era of tolerance, but there is a new anti-Semitism, economic, cultural, and political, and will adopt a national fervor in the Israel-Arab conflict. Another study, more recent in 21st century, African American more anti-Semitic than whites, 34 to 9%. And remember that, no college education, 43% of this. College education, 27% of that. And four-year college, 18%. Therefore, more educated, less anti-Semitism. And Goethe said that hatred is typical, the characteristic of uneducated masses. And I show you this in the first lecture. Hispanic anti-Semitic attitude, 29 versus 9% for whites, 36% for African Americans, and here unfavorable views of Jews, Catholics, Mormons. This is simply intolerance. Can't we get better? Signs, posters, Jews with a swastika looks to be ridiculous. Manifestation of anti-Semitism, harassment, poster, swastika and graffiti painting, vandalism, killings. Remember Charlottesville in 2017, white supremacists chanting Nazi slogans. Remember 2018, Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, a lonely shooter killing 11 during their prayers. They, in Charlottesville, blood and soul, they said. Typical a Nazi cry or mantra. That was in August 2017. And others in Topeka, they always had the problem with the Jews. when they are not doing well, when they have been persecuted by any other factions, they turn against whom? Against the Jews. Remember remote effects of anti-Semitism. It created a fertile ground for the Nazis, devastating consequences for many nations, including World War II. And yet, where are we now? We see secondary anti-Semitism, often explained as being caused by the Holocaust, as opposed to be despite it. And it was started with the encouragement from Iran in the Arab world. And the story of the state of Israel and the Palestinian Arabs is very well known to you. And between 48 and 52, major repatriation of persecuted Jews from North Africa occurred from Middle East and Muslim countries. Most of the Jews were brought to Israel. Remember the partition of the country with these areas and the blue areas that was not accepted by the Arabs. By whom? The leader of the Arab world in Palestine was the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. He assured Hitler that the Arab community in Palestine will serve as a fifth column for the German invasion that was planned or hoped for 1941. You know, it did not happen. But he is the man who told his Arab people, he had an immense influence on them, to leave the Israel, the Yahud, to go into the camps. And they listened to him. And they still live in Palestinian camps. At the same time, Israel, with great sacrifices, brought the Jewish return to Israel between 49 to 52. A fantastic operation, magic carpet. People from Yemen, for the first time on a plane, were brought to Israel. And yes, they were at the same camps in Israel. I know it because my parents lived in such a camp called Ma'abara when they left Romania in 1950. They lived in misery because there was not enough saving economy from the young Israel government. The country was only 2 years old. And Iraqi Jews were displaced, and they were in the Ma'abara. And let me just tell you something about the Jews from the Muslim countries. Do you know how many Jews lived in 1948 in the Muslim countries? 1,700,000 plus. In 1972, only 195,000 left, and today there are only 33,000 in these countries, where more than close to 2 million existed before the creation of the State of Israel. So, what are the selling points of the Israel-Arab conflict after 48? We were tensions and Fedayeen attack. I came to Israel in 1956, and I saw myself the murder of Israeli farmers on the borders. 2 weeks after I arrived, the Operation Kadesh started, Operation Sinai. I volunteered and opening Suez Canal was the result. In 1967, Six-Day War, Jerusalem liberated, the West Bank, Gaza, Sinai, and Golan Heights occupied. 1973, Yom Kippur War, Egypt and Syria, with 9 expeditionary forces, attacked Israel on Yom Kippur and failed. Then I come, what preoccupies me every day as an Israeli. After 74 years, several attempts to making peace, all unsuccessful. A two-state solution not yet possible. Why not? Iran-backed terrorist groups in Lebanon, Hezbollah, and in Gaza, Hamas, bombing and sabotaging Israel. This is the map in 2018. You see the West Bank, the Gaza, and Israel-occupied Golan Heights. This is the area, the grayish area from Hezbollah operation, and and Hamas is not in agreement with the West Bank. They are in Gaza and they attack Israel almost daily. The Gaza problem. Israel left Gaza in an attempt for peace, a difficult move. 3 generations of Jews lived there, raised their children there. As the Sharon demand, they left, they uprooted, they came back to Israel. In 2005, there were some discussion with Hamas and Islamic Jihad, and everybody agrees on ceasefire. What happened? Bombing of Israel continues. Hamas in 2006 won majority in the Palestinian election. Remember, they have control of Gaza, not of the West Bank. Results: tunnels operation in Israel for acts of sabotage, burning wheat fields in Israel, incendiary balloons over Israel, missiles and rockets launched from mosques, schools and hospitals, Israel retaliation. This is what we see. This is the Gaza, and all these communities in Israel are under attack. These are children during an attack. Holocaust denial. Who gave them this idea and delegitimization of Israel? Look at that. These are the countries who say Holocaust denial is illegal in red. Not the Scandinavian countries, not England, not Spain, not Balkan countries, Poland, Ukraine, and Turkey, and all the rest of the world. Holocaust denial is not illegal in these countries. And sure enough, recently in the United Kingdom, the Holocaust had to be removed from the curriculum of British school. An active group of Muslims had argued that the subject offends their sensitivities because Holocaust never happened. Holocaust never happened. Iran and its allies argue that the Holocaust is a myth. It is imperative to remind the world all that happened, to never, never forget. And yet, as we said in the intermission, Randy, I got a picture last week on June 17. This happened in front of the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, Washington, D.C. A group of, I believe, Arabs saluting, this is a Nazi salute, with a sign saying the Holocaust is a great lie. And here in Israeli with a long nose, there's something written in Arabic here. Did the world learn anything? History teaches only what to avoid. Violence are committed all the time, and I beseech. Our hope is in education, and only the truth. What hurts the victim most is not the cruelty of the oppressor, but the silence of the bystander. Elie Wiesel. Elie Wiesel. No human race is superior. No religious faith is inferior. Thank you. I'll leave you with this thought of John Maynard Keynes. End of lecture 3, end of this course. Thank you.
Thank you. I do think that I know that there's a hand raised, so I don't believe that's Edgar Moran, but he has your name. So whoever has that name, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. I think you have one.
Yeah, we have 7 minutes. Or more.
Go ahead. I don't know who you are because you you have someone else's name on your
Let me see the chat box. There are 4 things in the chat box. Please use the chat if you have questions. Thank you, thank you. Great job.
No, there is somebody who has their hand raised. If you're the person that has their hand raised, feel free to ask your question and Dr. Moran will be able to answer it for you.
I'm glad my son, Dan Moran, was able to listen to this.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Don't take this wrong. I'm just kind of curious. Guy from Eastern Europe who settled in Israel. Do you have any Irish blood in you? What is the origin of the name Moran?
It's a Hebrew name.
It is.
Yeah, it comes from More, teacher.
Are you related to Mark Moran, the comedian?
I'm a teacher. Thank you. I don't see other questions.
Fine
Another
presentation.
fine
Thank you.
presentation. Thank you for the compliments. I wanted to questions, and if you don't have any questions, thank you for attending these painful lectures. But I
Very
believe,
wonderful. Thank
I
you very
believe
much.
that
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Just
I do
so,
believe that we have to know all this, and
so
perhaps
informative.
Dana will inform you about the Holocaust lecture that the Alper Jewish Community Center wants to have in August, September, and I'll be with you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you
Wait,
very much.
I think, hold on one second. Don't go anywhere yet. Yes. So it looks like, is it Bryna? Do you have a question?
No,
No.
I'm
okay.
I'm
You have your
just
hand.
happy to be a participant
Great.
and to listen to Dr. Moran. He's an inspiration, and I hope that we learn from history, but all of these things that he said are really true. And kol hakavod, kol hakavod.
Very much. Thank you.
תודה רבה.
Thank you all.
Kavod.
Thank you all for joining
תודה
us.
רבה.
Thank you to Dr. Moran. You guys will all be getting an email from me with evaluation, as well as information on the next class that Dr. Moran will be teaching, which will be about the Holocaust starting on August 25th, and will run 4 Thursdays from that date. So I will email you all. Thank you again, and thank you very much to our professor and lecturer tonight.
Thank you. Thank you,
you.
Dara.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.